learning along that same journey, that if part of a joy that we had, and then also recognizing that there's a need, way more kids who are a little bit older who are looking to be adopted, that it started to seem like a direction that we might want to go.
Welcome to With You Podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Tara, and we explore relationships and life transitions.
And this episode is on adoption from a couple that we know that have adopted 3 kids.
Yeah, and we are welcoming Hillary and Jonathan today to tell their story, and we know you'll enjoy it, so let's welcome them. We're so glad you're here, Hillary and Jonathan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We hope you're excited to be here. We're really excited for you to be here.
Yeah, thanks for showing up. We're so excited to hear your story today because we've talked with you personally, but I don't know if we've ever sat down and just heard your whole story start to finish. So that's what we're here for today. So we just kind of want to get started because we're focusing on your journey to becoming parents. And we've gotten to kind of witness a lot of that, which has been really fun. And but we want to start way before that with the Hillary and Jonathan story, how you guys started.
Yeah, Marvel origin stories.
Yeah, so maybe just a quick overview. First of all, why don't you just introduce yourselves? Just tell everybody who you guys are, one by one, your name and kind of what you do. And then we'll go into how you came together.
I'm Jonathan Wildt, and I am by day a healthcare administrator at a nonprofit community health center on the west side of Chicago. But I aspire to be a backyard chicken farmer and a beekeeper.
A beekeeper. And you keep them, don't you, on your roof?
Yes.
I think that's a fascinating fact.
Yeah, we're expanding our hives to include one in the backyard at the house so the kids can partake this summer as well.
Well, we like to partake of the product. So the honey that you produced was amazing. So good.
Definitely a nice benefit.
So I would
That's
vote.
what he wants to talk about today.
Yeah, I would vote that you just do that both day and night. Kind of get rid of the administrative side and just make honey.
And I'm Hillary Wildt. I am a psychologist, and I put up with all of his backyard hobbies.
Yeah, I was wondering what you were going to say you do in the evening. So you're a psychologist during the day and you put up with him in the evenings. Yeah. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, that does. That sounds very familiar. Cool. So tell us kind of just the beginning of where you guys met and then how you decided to be life partners. Because how long have you been together now?
Coming up on 14 years here in April.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
You're just getting started.
Yeah. So we met, both of us separately felt called to intercultural work overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were working with the same missions agency in Sudan, but working in different areas. And so, as you guys can imagine, Hillary saw me from across the room and fell madly in love.
I can totally see that.
Same way David tells our story.
She started hitting on you, making eyes at you, right?
I couldn't resist me. So we had known one another from being on the same team and got to know one another because we were in separate cities in Sudan, mostly via chat and email at first. And over time, I did convince her that I was worth going on a date with. And
good for you.
So how did you, I'm kind of curious, how did you convince her?
I think, there's not a lot to do in Sudan socially. So I think that was a big draw, is just the entertainment value. But I think that neither one of us were necessarily looking for a relationship at the time, and felt pretty secure in that, except I did find her very attractive and engaging. And so I offered her an opportunity to take a romantic walk down by the historic River Nile that runs through Khartoum.
Wow. All right. So now we need to hear the actual story. So Hillary, how do you remember it?
It is true that we met in Sudan. It is true that I saw him at some point. And he was interesting. He was an interesting person. He had a lot of worms in his feet, and that's what he led with.
Oh,
Worms in his feet.
interesting start line.
That one definitely needs edited out.
Yeah, and we did go on our first date down by the Nile. So those are all true facts.
Nice.
The reality is the romantic walk alongside the Nile. It sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
In your head almost a historic Khartoum and the Nile sweeping down alongside. The problem is that I picked her up from the school where she worked, and it took like I don't know, an hour and a half to get to the Nile. So we had a really long march
walking
just to downtown in order to get there. And then when you come upon the Nile, there's probably 20 yards of weeds that you have to get through to get down to it. And you don't realize it when you're kind of up driving on the roads. But when you get down really close to the Nile, it smells like a sewer. So it really...
That's a good start.
Not quite as picturesque as you would have thought it could have.
But lots of opportunity for conversation and laughter as you're sweating through a forced march to stagnant water.
And I'm sure bugs and we're fans of adventure. It's a good way to like see if somebody's really in it.
Right. Yeah, I didn't lead her straight. At least I led with that, so she knew what she was getting into. A lot of poor decisions and route finding for the rest of her life.
So, like, how do you build on that? I mean, that's a strong start.
Yeah. I mean, you can only go up. So.
I did feel it didn't feel at the end like it had gone quite as I had planned, and I was pretty disappointed. And when I shared the experience with some friends, everyone was pretty convinced that was going to be the end of it, and I had kind of missed my opportunity. But thankfully, she's very gracious and continued to talk with me.
Yeah, so clearly there was a second date. So how soon did this move forward? Did you guys become friends first, or did you start dating?
Yeah, we became friends first, and mostly through talking, and he was trying to be more than friends at that time. I was trying to be friends, and so we did. We talked a lot. We had a lot of the same interests, passions, and I did email a friend and said, I think I have a mind crush on a guy here.
Oh, a mind crush. That's cute.
That's how we started. And then we progressed. We started to date. And then I left. I came back to the States.
So we did long distance for the entire duration of our dating relationship and engagement. And I returned a few weeks before we got married then in 2010.
We have noticed a really good success rate in couples who start with long distance. I have to say, I don't know what it is about writing letters or whatever.
Yeah, you have to get to a deeper level, I think.
And I think it particularly helps somebody who doesn't feel quite so socially competent. There's something about being able to take your time with your words and being thoughtful that you end up sharing more than you're able to sometimes face to face. So that was a benefit.
Yeah, those deep friendships are, I think, a big part of what makes marriage last. I mean, I know that's what keeps us together is that we're friends, because everything else occasionally goes up and down. Yeah, we have fun. I think I want to take you to the Nile now. It sounds
really, that's what you're getting out of that.
That's the takeaway of this story is like, I think we can do a forced march to the Nile.
Miles to the Nile.
Bug spray and treatment for my feet, all of it. I think it sounds really, really romantic. Maybe for our 35th wedding anniversary.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well, so
it's not there.
Okay, so you guys then you proposed at some point, or you decided that you both were in agreement that you'd be life partners. And did you get married in the States?
We did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got married in Colorado in April of 2010, and right after the wedding, moved to Chicago.
And then you've been here ever since.
Yeah, I think.
I started. When did I start to get to know you,
We must
Hillary?
have met you soon after that.
Yeah. in the fall of 2010.
Yeah. So you guys are newly married, coming to go to grad school, and that's where then our lives intersected.
Yep. Yeah.
We're very fortunate. And so as you developed your relationship, like premarital counseling or just deep conversations from afar, how did you talk through family expectations? You do the prepare and enrich, and how many kids do you want to have? Do you want to have kids? Those type of questions. How did you guys navigate that?
I'll start with telling sort of a cringeworthy but somewhat comical example of our premarital counseling. Is the church that Hillary attended had a class where couples would come in on Saturdays and they were working their way through a workbook. But because of the time difference between where I was in Darfur and her in Colorado Springs, I couldn't attend even virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And so she then saved the exercises and we would get on a call later to go through them. But I was unfortunately also in an area where my internet was spotty and the electricity would often go out. And so we'd be having these very intense conversations about very important, topics. And my internet would go out for multiple days.
You'd just be cut off.
This lingering, intense.
What are the qualities you don't like about each other?
And then
without
fade to black.
But I think some of those processes, even though they were non-traditional, probably were really just an adjunct to conversations that we were already having, either via email or when we were talking at that time on Skype. And we did see one another in person, both back in East Africa as well as in the United States, whenever we met one another's families as well.
Yeah. And we would talk about, kind of to the point of this podcast, we would talk about children, we would talk about adoption. That was something that we were both on the same page with before we even started dating. Was kind of the way that we wanted to have our children. So
tell us more about that. So you both you're kind of on the same page about having children and the route that you wanted to go. So how did that look for each of you?
I think for me, I don't know if it's common for young college dudes to be thinking about, adoption, but it came up for me in part on my faith journey and reading the Bible and various passages about adoption and orphan care and the father heart of God became very impactful in my life. And I remember several times thinking, boy, it'd be cool to, kind of have a family through adoption, but also recognizing that it wasn't a solo decision that one could make. First, you would have to find a partner who would want to live their life with you, as well as that person being okay with that. So it was something that prior to even meeting or knowing of Hillary, it was something that I had been very attracted to.
Yeah, that is unusual. That's amazing that that you had that thought before you even had a partner. It's a lot of people don't get there that quickly in that phase of life. So, and for you, Hillary, before you were with Jonathan, what was your thought about kids?
Yeah, it was similar. And so I was in a similar place, and that's a conversation that we had pretty early on. That was the way that I had always felt called to, well, not always, but, within the past several years, as I had really thought about family planning, that is the way that I had also felt God was calling. And so, I think we had those conversations before we were even officially dating.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you, that must have checked a big box for you when you both felt the same way about that, because that could be a hard conversation for somebody who had always wanted to be a biological parent.
Yeah, for me, I and maybe this is my own thoughts, is that most people that I would assume, probably would want to have, a biological kid. Is very common desire, passion. So whenever she'd offered that she, had always wanted to adopt, it was in my mind a confirmation of another thing that was kind of a similarity that we shared and connected over, but also something that started to make things feel like, yeah, this is something that there are people out there who also feel passionate about, starting a family in a similar way.
So you guys had the shared kind of belief, and there wasn't a disagreement there. That is actually confirmation. Going into then timing, how did you have the conversation of when should that be in our life? What does that look like? What's the process? There's all sorts of types of adoption, from newborns to international. I'm curious about just that thought process and how you got to the point of, yeah, we're ready to adopt and this is how we'd like to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't want children during grad school.
Yeah, we didn't make that choice, and wisdom, Hillary, wisdom.
So that was one piece of it, and then you can pick it up from there.
I think we're fortunate enough to have a number of friends and folks that we attended church with or are part of communities where they had adopted and done it, different ways, like you had outlined: international adoptions, infant adoption, had folks that were close to us that would foster um, kids from time to time. And so I think we were around people who had done it. So we kind of were knowing that we had a timeline, on a horizon that was several years out. We mostly focused our time, in addition to grad school, which was a little bit of a time suck,
Yeah, a little bit.
on building our relationship and enjoying one another. I think after having started off long distance, being together, in small moments, even if she was studying or writing papers, were really things that we treasured and enjoyed. And so we weren't in a big hurry to adopt necessarily, but in that time, we're kind of casually taking a look at the different agencies that help support you in the process. And so I would say it was probably around the time Hillary was finishing up her studies that we started reaching out to different agencies. And at that point had started to narrow a little bit, recognizing that, one interesting fact that we learned along the way is that there was a long waiting list of parents who are wanting to adopt infants, such that they were even closing it, several months into a year, because they had way more applicants than they were able to connect with infants needing homes. And so that influenced and developed our understanding of sort of the direction that we might end up going when we did adopt.
Mm-hmm.
In that time also, I think, realized that we both like kids who are a little bit older. Hillary in particular, she was a middle school science teacher, and she also roped me into serving in our church's youth group, which was not something that I was super comfortable with. Would probably not have done had she not
That
signed
was
me
good
and joined it.
practice.
So I think learning along that same journey that if it's part of a joy that we had, and then also recognizing that there's a need, way more kids who are a little bit older who are looking to be adopted, that it started to seem like a direction that we might want to go.
Yeah, Jonathan, is there a story you can tell of the moment you fell in love with middle schoolers? And what that was? Was it the smell, the chaos, kind of what things, and the situation? Just paint me a picture.
I can tell you one, because it's coming up. Sometimes your Google Photos will remind you of a period of time. As last week, the memory popped up in my photos of a time that Hillary signed us up to accompany a group of junior high and high school girls up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for winter. And so we drove a whole 15-passenger van full of young girls, 6 hours.
Wow.
For a weekend retreat. And so that was quite an experience for me that I look back and my memories and my pictures tells me that I treasure.
Yeah, there can be treasuring, and you can hold both things of chaos at the same time.
Yeah, that was a full immersion experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
they fell in love with his dancing. So that he's known for, actually, among
now
youth.
we're sorry this isn't a video podcast.
Yeah, because you should see him going. Look at him go. I am amazed by your dancing as well.
Zach, this also needs edited out.
So you were in middle school. You were stuck in middle school with kids, and we're realizing there's a need and there's an appreciation of what's going on developmentally that fit you all both really well. I can see
I think so.
I can see that. And
Mhm.
Hillary, how did you come to that same spot? I mean, being a middle school teacher doesn't always lead to then wanting middle schoolers.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't have middle schoolers yet, but it is something that we kind of thought about. We would want older kids. And so, but yeah, I love that age group. I love older kids. I like a little pushback. I like a little bit of personality. And so, but I also thrive in all things awkward, and that is that stage of life.
That is
So,
for sure. Not
like,
many people can say that. That's maybe why you and David see eye to eye so well, thriving in the awkwardness.
Oh, I'm glad you thought it was eye to eye rather than her being my
Well,
friend because I'm awkward and she appreciates it.
she's just
that
nodding
might
like,
be
well.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe both things can be true.
Yeah.
So as you went through the process, um, any challenges? Like, how did you move from, okay, I think it's narrowed down to we have an idea of looking for kids that are a little bit older that have a need. How'd the story move forward from there?
I think that was a phase that was a little bit challenging, finding the right agency to work with and the right program. We'd heard from folks, oh, you can foster kids and then adopt them. And I think we understand ourselves. There's a certain element of, in this process, probably not as intentional for me. It was more realizing it retrospectively is the whenever you're providing foster care services, you're really providing a service. The goal is always for the kids to be reunified with their family. And so a beautiful service, one that, as I learned more about it, could definitely envision, being able to provide that. But since our primary goal was to adopt, did not choose to start by fostering kids,
Mhm.
even though we did eventually get a foster care license and go through the training as part of the program that we did end up going through ultimately through another agency, which was called the Waiting Child Services Program. And so these are kids who had been in the foster care system,
Mm,
most of them for a number of years. And the options are that they'll either age out of the foster care system or get adopted.
okay. So
So,
you guys narrowed down to the agency you wanted to use and ruled out the fostering first.
mhm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Knowing that you wanted to be the ones to become their parents. That I imagine that's so hard. I know a lot of people who do foster parenting, and that is a challenge, like that attachment, and then ending that relationship.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful program and so thankful for the folks that provide that service for kids too. I mean,
Hmm.
knowing that our kids were in the foster care system for several years and had multiple placements and thinking about, some of the great folks that helped provide care for them in that period of time, a very wonderful thing.
Yeah. So you have the agency and then it just happens like you get the kids the next day.
Yeah,
Overnight.
exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's just like, and then okay, we're good to move forward.
Yeah. Now so we started then the kind of the process of getting ready, which, was a lot of paperwork and background checks. And for us, because at the same time we kind of renovating our home. And so we're needing to get our home in a place where it was able to support, being able to have kids live there. And so we were kind of fixing up stuff at our house and preparing for what's called a home study, where they kind of assess the goodness of fit that we might have with potential kids. And so all that process, I think we started in the summer of 2020 and finished kind of the home study portion where we could start getting matched with kids in the summer of 2021. So almost a full year just doing that process.
Oh, wow. And did it lead to kind of good marital connection as you go through that process?
I think so. We did have to take a lot of training. We took, training through the state of Illinois, um, which was beneficial. And we also had several hours of training through our agency as well. A lot of topics, are ones that maybe didn't apply to us necessarily, but I think through that shared experience of having a checklist of things that we needed to work on is certainly a bonding experience.
Yeah.
Hillary was was renovating a bathroom. And so she was doing a lot of tile and plumbing and flooring,
See,
which
I was going to throw that in there. When you say home renovation, a lot of people imagine you have people in your house, but I know you guys are DIY. You are in there elbows deep in the plaster and whatever else. So you had a lot going on.
yeah, there's nothing like the pressure of a social worker coming to take a look at your home to really light a fire under you to make sure that you've got your bathroom functional.
That's right.
Yes.
And you have all the power tools put away safely from just laying around the floor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the trainings that you talk about, what kind of topics were included? What was involved in the trainings that you went through?
I think ones that were helpful for me, not having gone through a doctoral program in psychology, were things related to brain development and attachment and trauma, and just the kind of the both feelings of kind of grief and loss, along with kind of joy and connection, kind of taking
Mm.
place in adoption as well, was a healthy thing. And we even expanded kind of our because it's one thing for the both of us to have felt called towards adoption and go through these trainings and be prepared for the home study, but we also wanted our families to be, in sync with us as well. And so part of our journey was also sharing with them that desire and for them to work through, over several years after we were initially married, that we weren't going to be having a baby. And that was, where the conversations really started, but then picked up in earnest probably in that season there between 2020 and 2021, as we did a book study with our families to talk about it and what it looks like and what experiences our kids might be coming in with that are different, because neither of our families, adoption isn't common necessarily. And so there was a lot that we wanted to make sure that we could prepare them for as well, even as we were kind of preparing ourselves.
That's an amazing idea. Did that come from you guys, or was that encouraged by the training, or how did you
I'll
guys
take
come to
credit for it, but I'm pretty sure it was Hillary's decision.
Yeah.
That's nice, usually, yeah.
Hillary,
Actually, she made it really fun too, because then we bought bottles of wine, sent them to her folks and my folks, and then with suggested food pairings that people make on their own. And then we all read the chapter each week and then would sign on to the same Zoom call while we were drinking wine and eating. And so that was the draw, because I think just regular Zoom book study didn't seem like it was necessarily going to get everyone at the table. But when you send them wine in the mail, they're more apt to attend.
that is a fabulous idea.
And this was in the midst of COVID, right? That's part of the reason that you had to kind of order out and send out beverages and food for engagement. Y'all couldn't get together. Okay, yeah, I was just doing.
How was the response from your family?
It was good. I mean, we did spend some significant time talking about wine pairings during this.
Fair. That's fair.
But I think, for them, one of the reasons we wanted to do the book study is we did realize that it was going to be a mourning process for them. And it's something that we had already kind of walked through. But it's hard whenever you have a picture of how generations are going to grow within your family, and then that picture changes. And so it was just something that we wanted to create space for our families to get together and kind of just talk about some of those things, and then understand how parenting and grandparenting and aunt and uncling was going to be different for them.
Yeah, because you miss some developmental stages. Which might be nice, but also then feels a little jarring.
Right. And we have nieces and nephews, and seeing how our family, has really enjoyed, being around kids in those years, and recognizing that our kids would be coming in with a different set of experiences and missed out on some of those, and wanted, the whole family to be aware of just that dynamic and how we handle it, as well as also, recognizing that what we were prepared, to do in the adoption process is take the whole kid, and that comes with, all that they bring with them, which includes a lot of trauma and perhaps some different behaviors that are atypical for our family, and how to coach and learn with our family how to interact, given those realities.
Yeah. You go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I'm just kind of curious, Hillary. You are very trauma informed. It's part of your training, not just on the mission field, but as psychologist and the work you do. And you guys have done an amazing job finding ways to kind of prepare. But there's always those unexpected things. How did the preparation? How was it helpful for both the two of you and your families? And what unexpected things that, no matter how much you prepared, kind of surprised you?
Yeah, I don't know if we have a lot of surprises necessarily. I think we came in not like saying it could be any range of behaviors. And then we also got 2,000 pages of those behaviors written down before the kids came, right? And so we kind of knew what behaviors our kids were going to be exhibiting and had exhibited in the past. I think probably what is surprising in terms of how hard it is the difficulty that's put forth because of the attachment injuries that our kids have experienced. And so
okay, so let's pretend we don't know what that means, that like attachment and attachment injury. Just a real quick mini lecture.
Yeah, so I mean, attachment is whenever we are looking at a baby and they smile at us and we smile back, and we all feel good, fuzzy feelings when we do that. And the baby coos and we laugh, right? And there's this attachment that's happening in that moment where you're building connections, and it's something that is, you can feel it intrinsically. And for our kids, they had had a lot of breaks in relationship. They hadn't had a lot of that interaction back and forth of when they would smile, somebody wouldn't always smile back. And so their brains didn't learn to respond to those cues, and they learned that actually other people weren't going to be responding to those cues. And so they have different ways of expressing themselves, and they have different ways of seeking care and support, right? That aren't as easy to respond to as a smile or a giggle.
Yeah.
And I think missing that cueing, missing the intrinsic feeling of connection that feels like it should be an 8, that's the most difficult and most surprisingly difficult piece of adoption for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm feeling like I want to rewind a little bit because we've missed the part of the story where you meet your kids.
Oh, yeah.
So we're talking about them, but we haven't met them yet in the story.
We'll come back to trauma.
Yes. Oh, yes. We do want to talk a lot about how life has changed and what you are learning together with your kids. But tell us that. So you had gone through the training, and then there's the process of getting matched. So tell us what that looks like and how you met your children and how that went.
Yeah, so it's a slow process, and then a really fast process. You know the dates, so you can go ahead.
So I think we finished our home study in around May of 2021. And then at that point, once we were kind of approved, had all the licenses, the certifications, appropriate vaccines for your cat, and all the things that you need to be eligible to have kids safely in your home, then the question was, how do we go about matching with kids? And due to the wonders of technology, there's databases of kids that are waiting to be adopted all across the country. And so we had access to this database, and something as simple as a thumbnail photo and a brief bio, both for us and then for the agencies, who are looking for homes. And then for our part, being able to look and see all these really cute kids out there they're looking for homes, and reading those profiles, and then submitting our home study to be reviewed to see if we might be a good fit for those kids. And so later that summer, Hillary actually was combing the website and found 3 kids that were from out of state, and she messaged me and said, "I think these are the ones." And she submitted our home study through our worker, and we got a call back the next week that they said they'd like for us to join a meeting to discuss if we would be a good fit for them. And so we did that. And then the next step after that was that we got to send them Christmas presents. This moved us kind of into fall and Christmas time. And so we got to interact with them via distance and then started meeting them on Zoom calls into January. And then actually also later that month went down to visit them and did a whole weekend with them in an Airbnb. And
Yeah,
so
that
we
had
had
to
a very
be amazing. So these are three biological siblings, right?
yep,
Who you wanted to keep together. And what were their ages at the time when you
8, 6, and 5.
Woo.
Yeah, so that's like a complete family.
So it's not just one kind of older child, but three older children. And was that the plan?
So we had been approved for 1 to 6 children or something like that, 1 to 5 or 6 children. And so we were looking at everything in that range. And I love my brother. He's my best friend. He's the person that I always pick up the phone and call anytime there's something going on. And so we really wanted to keep siblings together. And that was something that we were really passionate about. I was really passionate about was keeping siblings together. So we were looking at sibling sets primarily.
And at this point, too, it's worth noting that our kids were living in separate homes, too. And so they weren't,
Oh,
hadn't lived together, all three together for over a year at that point.
so they were all in separate foster homes at that time.
Our-
2 were with one, and then one
Okay.
was
Yeah.
on her own.
So then you all meet together in the Airbnb for a weekend that they haven't necessarily been together. Woo! I have a picture in my head, but I'm curious what it looked like in real life.
It probably looked like that. It was, time that we were excited to meet them. I think they were excited to meet us, and even more excited to be together, all three of them in the same spot. And we ate pizza and played and experienced the full range of emotions that one can feel over that weekend. Went to a dinosaur park and experienced plenty of meltdowns and how to de-escalate situations. And it was a whole weekend that we had when we were with them. And so I think we had a pretty good understanding for what life might look like for a little while at that point.
And
Yeah.
what did your hearts say when you met them in person? Did you feel confirmed? Did you feel more scared? What were you guys feeling?
I think for me, it was actually after like the end of the weekend, we went to church with our boys' foster parents. And so I think for me, it was more during that time whenever we were worshiping and I'm feeling emotions.
I see the
Yeah.
feelings. That's amazing.
And we both started crying. And I think it was because we were exhausted. It was because I had just experienced our first trauma with the kids. And also because it was very clear, like these are your kids.
Mm. Mm. And then
Yep.
and then you had to leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did. And then we had a couple-week period, and then they actually came to Chicago in the middle of winter and experienced extreme cold and snow and spent the weekend with us in what would become their home, which was really fun experience for them. First time on an airplane for them. And so they had a lot of firsts that were coming. But at that point, yeah, it was challenging both when we were visiting them and when they came to us saying goodbye, recognizing that we're kind of in the here but not quite yet was a challenging, part of the journey for us too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And the heart of a parent opening up. I mean, I think the tears are that, not just exhaustion, but that's the heart of a parent too.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the reality.
Yeah.
and there's just all of a sudden your heart grows and aches and wants to protect and can't necessarily. I mean, all of those dualities that drive us crazy and yet digs us deeper into love with them.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially since our daughter was on her own. She wasn't with her brothers. That was particularly hard to leave her because, yeah, it was the leaving her alone. It felt like
she was ready to come right then.
And she was ready.
Yeah.
Express those.
So they were excited after being in the snow in Chicago. They were excited.
They were. And so then shortly thereafter, they joined us. We'll be coming up on 2 years next week, actually. And so it'll be 2 years that they've been here with us. And so the way the process works is we had several months in between before the adoption was actually finalized, but they were placed and came home with us in February of that year.
Yeah, and that had to be big too when it was just, now this is our life now. Now we all live together, and now we got to do every day. I think every parent has that moment where you have your dreams, and then and then there's like, oh, every day. There's no more sleeping in. There's no more all of those things.
The way I drive, I wasn't very aware of. Then whenever you have 3 kids in the back seat, then you start to become aware of all those stop signs you kind of coast through a little bit. A little too cavalier at passing on some side streets.
Have you gotten the kind of repeating what you say while you drive from your kids in the back? That's always humbling as well. I'm sure it doesn't happen for you, but for me, it was like, oh no. Oh, yeah.
No, we don't know what you're talking about.
No,
Okay.
no.
Oh,
no.
good. Well, let's just move on then.
No, so tell us about your life and how that's changed in the last 2 years, and becoming parents, and kind of starting fresh with kids that have a bit of history that they bring with them, and all of that. Hillary, started with what's been hard, like just not having that beginning attachment piece with them and having to create that. Can you tell us some stories of what that's looked like for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's for, you want us to start with the hard stuff?
Yeah, we'll end with the happy, rejoious.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's the little moments. It's whenever you show up to pick them up from school, and there's you see this kid who is waving to their parent, and this kid who's waving to their parent, and then you see your kid who's, oh, okay, time to go. But there's no exchange. There's no like, oh, you're here kind of sentiment. Or, we would go to the beach, and we would bring our neighbor kids as well, and they would be checking in with us. Just, how kids do, that you're sitting there and they wander out a little bit into the water, and then they look back and they check in, and our kids wouldn't at all be checking in. And so, it's just, you miss the cueing, and then you're also always a little bit on edge because they're never checking in. And so they can wander quite far without any feedback from you. And so
we did lose one at the beach one time.
We've all done that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's different.
Yeah.
Ours was the grocery store, I think.
Yeah. Multiple places. That heart-dropping moment where you're not sure how far away they are from you. Yeah.
But it sounds like it feels you have to do both sides of the cueing, for lack of a better term, of you're sending out cues, and you have to help them, like, hey, turn around and check in with us. And so you're doing both sides, which is a different thing.
Yeah. And you have to make all of that very explicit. And, those things that I think you assume come naturally in relationship, you have to say out loud. Like, now is the time when you should turn around and look at me.
Yeah. Yeah, it adds an extra layer of exhaustion, I'm sure, just that vigilance.
I'm kind of curious if you are starting to narrate all of your life now.
With each other.
Yeah.
Like, now is the time that you should turn towards me.
Yeah.
I would appreciate if you held my hand.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
I think, in our experiences, I think probably if you talk to anyone who's adopted kids, you talk to one person, you've heard one experience, and everyone's very different. We have friends that have adopted kids and have, wonderful stories, and their kids are attached, or they've, adopted a kid after having a couple biological kids, and, things sound very smooth and warm and wonderful when we've talked with them. And I would say our experience, the first year was really, really hard. And there's a point where there was, times not that we weren't prepared for how hard it might be. It was every bit as challenging as we expected that it might be. And I'm glad that we went in with our eyes open and recognizing that it might not be, quite this warm fuzzy, that there was going to be grief, there was going to be loss, there were going to be attachment things and trauma stuff and big behaviors and challenges with transition. But it has been all consuming for us. But part of the benefit, I guess, that we had was, one, knowing that it was going to be challenging, and then two, not expecting that it was going to be filling this void that we had in our hearts that we were looking for kids to fill. And instead, we could enter in recognizing that even though we wanted and desired to have these kids and love them very much, that we weren't expecting them to fulfill empty places in us, and therefore setting such a high bar that
or in our relationship.
Right.
We like being together alone,
That was actually my biggest concern when we were adopting kids, and I voiced it to Hillary too. As I said, I am a little worried and already jealous for your time and attention, because I've had it, myself, and then to be able to have to then share, her with kids. Of course we want, but at the same time, I also like my alone time with my wife, and I'm really glad my kids go to bed in the evening. She and I can talk about something other than Power Rangers and Pokemon.
That's what I like to talk to Tara about, actually.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this Pokemon that I caught.
I'm getting more into it myself.
Yeah, we've come full circle.
Yeah. So with that, I'm curious, you started out talking about the heart for adoption was really founded in your faith, understanding how God adopts us into his family through Jesus, there's this deep spiritual adoption. How have you connected into that in both the joy, but also the heartache or the challenge? How has that affected your spiritual life with that initial calling, like, oh, I think this is a spiritual thing, and now you're in it, living kind of God's life?
Yeah, it makes me really appreciate his grace in my life, because whenever I think of, the putting myself in a position of, sometimes a not so attached child of God, or some rebellious, or defiant, I see those things in my own self now, and certainly makes me appreciate the love that I can experience from God. Being in a position of an adopted father myself, I certainly, it's done two things. One is there's nothing like kids to bring out some of the darker sides that you have, and so I can see some of the challenges I have, where I always thought I was a somewhat patient person, but I realized I have a bit of a short fuse every now and then.
Yeah,
I can be pretty curt in my words.
Stretches you.
And that's one, right? And then two is, just really recognizing that, I bring very little to my relationship with God sometimes, and it's all because of his love for me, and realizing I have a very imperfect love ability, in my life.
Yeah.
You have thoughts, Hillary? We're all looking at Hillary.
Yeah, all three of us are looking at Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it wouldn't make sense for me to do this thing without God, and without it being a calling. And so I think that is the foundation, and he's the one that I cling to whenever I'm not getting my attachment needs met in my relationship with my kids, right? I really look to God. And I think for me too, it's just a reminder of God really, I believe his heart breaks when we are not when we're rejecting connection with him. And so I think I just feel that at a different level, where he really wants us to just look at him, right? And to be excited when he shows up. And so, I think those are, yeah, just the little things, like remembering to continue to have the little moments with God as well.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Wow.
I know.
I love that. I love how you guys connect that into the whole reason why you're doing it and what that's taught you about your own heart and your connection, because that's the core of what we believe too, that everything we're created for connection, and it's all because of God's wanting to be connected with us. So we imagine there'll be other people listening to your story who are interested in adoption. So would you have a few tidbits maybe to share of what might be the most helpful thing to think about if somebody's kind of beginning that journey or thinking about it?
Yeah, like 7.
Like 7? However many pop to mind.
I mean, I think one thing is what Jonathan was touching on earlier, like make sure that you're not filling a void in your life, it's similar to when you find a partner, you don't want them to have to fill a void or complete you. You want to be able to be complete, and then you can be two complete people together. And it's the same, I think, with adoption. Like be good with yourself, be good in your relationship, or else I can't imagine we could have gotten through the past 2 years if we weren't good in both of those things. And so really spend time to invest in those things beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jonathan?
For me, some of it has been, I like to read, and I've read several books about adoption, and then Hillary's had me read some books about brain development and trauma. And I think if you are going to adopt kids that have experienced, challenging situations, that is valuable information to know ahead of time, and then also to become a little aware of yourself and how your upbringing and how you interact with your parents, and relationships you're bringing into parenting kids as well. I think there are times where sometimes I feel a little guilty for not being as excited about being a father as I think other folks assume that I am. A lot of times we'll share a story, oh, we adopted 3 kids last year. Oh, wow, you just must be through the moon excited. And we were and are. And I would say it also leaves very little space for it to have been a really challenging situation that we've gone through, both for us and our kids as well. And then it's not kind of like things were bad, now they're awesome and great. It's a lot of days, are not always so great. And so I would say for folks that are looking to adopt, if and maybe even especially if you've raised biological kids, if you're going to adopt a neuroatypical kid, it's going to look very different. Some of the same tools that worked great, for your kids developmentally might not work, and it could look very, very different. And just being aware of that and reading, for me was very helpful in the process. I also attend an adoption support group every now and then, and sometimes it's really helpful for me to hear stories from other folks when it's not going well. And so it makes you feel like you're not crazy or alone, because sometimes, whenever you're dealing with attachment needs, and trauma in particular too, I think some folks will say things, well-intentioned folks, family members even, oh, that's all kids. All kids,
Mm,
do that. And I know that's true, but it's only true to a certain extent, that it is very different, in the cases of some kids that have experienced really challenging, traumatic experiences early in life.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, as you were talking about before, being worried about how is this going to affect the time that you guys have together, what are you guys doing now to protect some of that time and to kind of value your relationship and stay strong with these new challenges?
Early bedtime.
non
Early
non
bedtimes. For the kids or for you guys?
Yeah, ours has gotten earlier too, but yeah.
And I think we both have jobs that we carry around with us at all times of the day. But I do think having time where, when the weather's nice, we sit on the porch, and have a glass of wine together and just talk about stuff that's not the kids, sometimes is really enjoyable. We don't get as much opportunity to go out on dates, but one thing that our church community does, which is really great, is does a parents' night out where the kids can come into the church, eat pizza and watch a movie, and gives us 2 hours to go have dinner together. And that's been really enjoyable to be able to have some spaces every now and then for being able to connect and talk.
It sounds like a win-win. Have you gotten Hillary into a beekeeper suit yet?
Well, she has.
That was before the kids, though.
Oh,
We do have small ones for kids now too.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
So they're learning to enjoy the family hobbies, just like Hillary got to learn to enjoy the family hobbies.
yeah. Well, are they helping tile anything yet, or like redoing
yet.
a room?
We'll
We
get
have them
to
in the
that.
yard, so they do mulching and mowing the yard, working in the garden. So we're putting them to work.
And we have chickens now because we needed more lives to
Oh.
take care of.
Right. I hope you're getting some good eggs from that.
So they take care of them as well.
That is great. And Jonathan, I just really appreciated the having to hold a bunch of things at the same time. The joy of having the 3 kids that you so dreamed of, and it being hard, and that being okay. Of love is both that kind of tingly feeling and the choice of, I'm going to enter into this pain today. And it's not an either or thing, but I think you're right that there's certain situations or things that you never thought you would be doing or saying or picking up out of your toes, right? That is part of mother and fatherhood, that deep love, regardless of the situation. But it's not easy, and I'm glad that there's a support group. Are there other resources as people listen and think about this, kind of the books that you're reading, the groups that you're attending, things you'd recommend?
There's a lot of good books out there, related to, Hillary's probably could corner the market on good reading that you'd have. For me, it's just understanding about, our kids' brain development stuff. And so, what's his name? Siegel.
Mm-hmm.
She could send a list of ones. I've appreciated ones that, also talk about some of the hard stuff. And so one of my favorites is Dancing with the Porcupine. And there's a group on reactive attachment disorder, that it takes place online forums and emails that I appreciate, having opportunities to engage with other folks that, are sometimes struggling through being adoptive parents, and also I think our agency has, always offered up opportunities for us to connect with other folks that have adopted kids as well. Sometimes I will say the last thing I want to do whenever I have a free moment is go talk about the kids and other stuff. And so there are probably more resources that we don't take advantage of. But yeah.
Well, whatever you guys do know and send us a list of, we'll link on our website following the podcast, so people can just click on those things. Because all of those things are helpful.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us and with everybody else. It's really hopeful and encouraging. And I think the honesty is important, because we have these religious ideas, we have these really good intentions, and they can be that, and they can be hard. So I think it's an important message, and we're thankful to have you here, but also as friends.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having us and for your support too. We know you guys played an important role in our adoption journey as well, and so we thank you for that.
Yeah.
And if you guys ever want to babysit, just let us know.
And there's the end of the podcast.
We're happy to. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you too.